Hello, everybody. This is Demographia, and as you can see, I am finally back. So, for this June episode, I will be talking about multiracial people. So, multiracial people are the last so called race I'll be making a video about, but it is sort of complicated, and there's a reason I saved this one for last. The thing is, multiracial people aren't actually a race, because obviously they are a mix of races. Therefore, it's sort of confusing as how they should be classified, but this will be about all multiracial people in general instead of any specific combination of races. Anyways, multiracial people may live in southern North America, northern South America, Madagascar, and southwestern Africa, with most living in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Chile, Madagascar, South Africa, and Namibia. And people also use mixed race to refer to these people. So multiracial people are divided into several ethno-linguistic groups, the largest one being the Mestizo one, followed by the Pardo one, followed by the Malagasy one, followed by the African Creole one, followed by the Zambo one, followed by the Dougla one, followed by the Mulatto one, followed by the Asian Creole and the Pacific Creole one. So in total there are around 367,500,000 multiracial people. Now, Mestizo people mainly live in El Salvador, Honduras, most of Mexico, most of Guatemala, most of Belize, most of Nicaragua, most of Panama, most of Colombia, most of Ecuador, most of Peru, most of Paraguay, most of the Dominican Republic, southeastern Cuba, northern Venezuela, northern and eastern Bolivia, and northern Chile. Pardo people may live in most of Brazil. African Creole people may live in western South Africa and southern Namibia. Malagasy peoples mainly live in Madagascar. Dougla people mainly live in northern Guyana. Zambo people mainly live in Madagascar. And Mulatto people, Asian Creole people, and Pacific Creole people are so few in number that they do not make up a significant population of any area of the world. Now, out of multiracial people, around 226,700,000 or 67.3% are Catholics, around 66,500,000 or 19.8% are Protestants, around 30,100,000 or 8.9% are atheists, around 7,200,000 or 2.1% are pagans, and around 2,600,000 around 2,600,000 or 0.8% are Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a religion that claims to be Christian and claims to be restoring Christianity to its true roots. They believe that the destruction of the world at Armageddon and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth is the only way to solve all of humanity's problems. And despite claiming to be Christian, they reject the Trinity, life after death, and hell, and don't even celebrate Christmas, Easter, or even birthdays. They don't even use the Bible, instead using the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures. It was founded by Charles Taze Russell in the late 1870s in Pittsburgh. Around 1,800,000 or 0.5% are Spiritists. Spiritism is a religion that studies spirits. Obviously, it was founded in the 19th century in France by Allan Kardec. Spiritists believe that humans are immortal spirits that are incarnated several times to improve. Around 1,200,000 or 0.4% are Muslims, and around 500,000 or 0.1% follow Santeria. Santeria is a religion that was mostly paganism mixed with some Catholicism. It was developed between the 16th and 19th centuries in Cuba. Finally, around 100,000 are Mormons. Now, the largest multiracial people are the Mestizo people. There are around 250,400,000 Mestizo people. This means that they make up 63.9% of multiracial people. Mestizo people speak Spanish, and their origins is in between around 1492 and around 1750 in El Salvador, Honduras, Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Panama, the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Paraguay, Venezuela, Cuba, Bolivia, and Chile, when Spaniards mixed with Native Americans and had children with them after Spain conquered a large part of the Americas. The origins of Spanish people, meanwhile, is in central Spain between around 1200 and 1300. Mestizo people may live in El Salvador, Honduras, most of Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Panama, the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Paraguay, northern Venezuela, southern Cuba, eastern Bolivia, and northern Chile. And out of the mestizo people, around 75.9% are Catholics, around 16.1% are Protestants, around 6.5% are atheists, around 1.3% are Jehovah's Witnesses, and around 0.2% follow Santeria. Now, the second largest multiracial people are the Pardo people. They're around 90,400,000 Pardo people, and this means that they make up 26.8% of multiracial people. Pardo people speak Portuguese. Now, the origins of Pardo people is between around 1500 and around 1750 in Brazil. Pardo people, in a more general sense, are just all multiracial people in Brazil. However, it is usually a mix of European, Native American, and African people. Now, the origins of Portuguese people is around 1400 in Portugal. Pardo people mainly live in most of Brazil. Out of the Pardo people, around 65.1% are Catholics, around 22.4% are Protestants, around 8.2% are atheists, around 2% are spiritists, around 1.7% are Muslims, and around 0.6% are Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, the third largest multiracial people are the Malagasy peoples. There are around 24,900,000 of them, and this means that Malagasy peoples make up around 7.4% of multiracial people. Malagasy people speak Malagasy, and their origins is between around 200 BC and 500 when Austronesian peoples from the Sunda Islands arrived in Madagascar, which surprisingly was completely uninhabited. In the 7th century, Bantu people started arriving, as well as Omanis, interestingly enough. In the 8th century, more Austronesians, mainly Malay, Javanese, Buginese, and Oranglaut people arrived. More Bantu peoples arrived in the 9th century, and more Arab people after the 10th century. All these people mixed and formed the Malagasy people by around 1000. However, Malagasy peoples are still mainly a mix of Southeast Asian and African people. Out of the Malagasy peoples, around 43% are Protestants, around 28% are pagans, around 21% are Catholics, around 5% are Muslims, and around 3% are atheists. Now, the largest Malagasy people are the Merina people. There are around 6,500,000 of them. They mainly live in central Madagascar and speak Malagasy. The second largest Malagasy people are the Betsimisaraka people. There are around 3,700,000 Betsimisaraka people. They mainly live in northern Madagascar and speak Malagasy as well. And the third largest Malagasy people are the Betsilio people. There are around 3 million of them. They mainly live in central Madagascar and also speak Malagasy. Moving on, we have African Creole peoples. There are around 5,400,000 African Creole peoples. This means that they make up around 1.6% of multiracial people. African Creole people speak Afrikaans and English. The origins of African Creole peoples is between around 1650 and around 1920 in western South Africa and southern Namibia. The origins of Afrikaans is between around 1795 and 1980 in southwestern South Africa, and the origins of English people is around 550 in the southern United Kingdom. Out of the African Creole peoples, around 71.4% are Protestants, around 16.7% are atheists, around 7.1% are Catholics, and around 4.8% are Muslims. Now, the largest African Creole people are the colored people, and no, I'm not even making that up. There are around 5,400,000 colored people. Colored people mainly live in southern Namibia and western South Africa. Colored people speak Afrikaans and English. Second largest African Creole people are the Bastard people, and no, I'm not making this up either. There are around 30,000 Bastard people, and they mainly live in southern Namibia. They also speak Afrikaans and English. Now, another group of multiracial people are the Zambo people. There are around 600,000 Zambo people. This means that they make up around 0.2% of multiracial people. Zambo people speak English, Spanish, Garifuna, and Mosquito Coast Creole. And yes, that's an actual language. The origins of Zambo people is between around 1522 and around 1832 in northeastern Nicaragua. Zambo people are a mix of African and Native American people. Origins of Garifuna people is in the Lesser Antilles when Carib people conquered Arawakan peoples and mixed with them. Their children then spoke a mix of their languages known as Island Carib. Later on, they mixed with African slaves in the Caribbean between around 1600 and around 1797 before they were deported to the Mosquito Coast in northeastern Nicaragua. Now, the origins of Mosquito Coast Creole people is between around 1638 And around 1894, when African slaves mixed with Europeans, mostly English people and Native Americans, mostly Mosquito people who are an actual people. Zambo people mainly live in northeastern Nicaragua, and out of the Zambo people, around 58.2% are Catholics, around 25.5% are Protestants, around 15.3% are atheists, and around 1% are Jehovah's Witnesses. And there are the Dougla people. There are around 200,000 Dougla people. Dougla people speak English and Caribbean Hindustani. The origins of Dougla people is between around 1830 and around 1930, when Indians, who were usually brought as indentured servants, arrived in Guyana and mixed with Africans who had already been there for centuries and were usually descendants of slaves. The origins of Caribbean Hindustani people is between around 1830 and around 1930. Indians, mostly speaking Bhojpuri, arrived in northern Guyana. Dougla people mainly live in northern Guyana. Out of the Dougla people, around 55% are Protestants, around 26% are Hindus, around 9% are Catholics, around 7% are Muslims, and around 3% are atheists. And finally, we reach the groups with so few people that there isn't enough information to say much about them. Firstly, there are the mulatto people, and that includes me. They are a mix of African and European people. Then there are Asian Creole people who are a mix of all races across Asia, and Pacific Creole people who are a mix of all people all across the Pacific. Now, guys, to learn more about these races, don't forget to check out my videos about European people, Native American people, African people, and Southeast Asian people, but just in general, check out all my Races of the World video series. So, and I mean, now that's it. The Races of the World series is over. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.